So, as we get closer and closer to Slammiversary in July, Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Scott D'Amore has teased possibly signing some of the recently released WWE Superstars and talent. He has even stated that maybe some of the conversations have already started between the two parties. Now, for the 10 superstars released from WWE on April 15, the free agency presents themselves an opportunity to find new places to work and new places to build their career post WWE. Now, speaking with the Wrestling Perspective podcast, Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President, Co-Executive Vice President Scott D'Amore commented on some possible talents such as Samoa Joe and Chelsea Green to re-emerge in Impact Wrestling. Of course, they do have histories of Impact Wrestling. Samoa Joe is a former Impact World Champion, X Division Champion, Tag Team Champion, whereas Chelsea Green is also a former Impact Wrestling Knockouts Champion. And he believes, he being Scott D'Amore, it to be a possibility that they could return to the land of Impact, making reference to last year's Slammiversary, where former Impact stars such as Eric Young and Doc Gallows returned, and new stars such as Heath Slater and Kyle Anderson made their Impact debuts. Now, as I mentioned, the co-executive vice president of Impact Wrestling originally signed Samoa Joe to Impact, then being TNA, back in 2005, and he stated he would love the opportunity to work with him again. He said the following quote, there's quite a few quotes here, so bear with me. He said, quote, "I think when you look at what we did at Slammiversary last year with all the buzz, and I think there's an opportunity here. There's some great talent, and they've got this hiccup in their career. We've all been there, probably where we've been let go, and they've got the opportunity to come and do like so many of the people did last year, and forge themselves new opportunities and different, in some ways, better opportunities for themselves. Look, in 2005, when I got put in charge of the creative for TNA, I knew there was one guy that I wanted, and that was Samoa Joe, and I worked very hard getting on the phone because WWE wanted him as well. Myself and Mike Tenay, who's an amazing dude that I know some of you have met and got to be around. We just knew Joe was different and special, and we wanted to have him there. That was 2005. We were able to get him and do some pretty damn cool stuff. I got mad respect for Samoa Joe, and I would love an opportunity to work with him again, both because of his unbelievable talent and his unique charisma, and also because he's just a good dude. So many of that other talent, you look at it, whether it's Billy Kay and Peyton Royce, whether it's Chelsea Green, you know, there's just so much there, and I just got to say, I think there's a chance that some talent's going to move around, and you're just going to have to stay tuned and be careful what I say, but maybe some conversations have started. Now, of course, during Rebellion, and we did a video about this, during the Impact Rebellion pay-per-view event, Impact Wrestling announced that Slammiversary, of course, will return in July. Now, no official date was given for the event, but in the teaser for the show, recently released WWE Superstars such as Samoa Joe, Chelsea Green, and Mickie James were shown. Footage of Okada and Naito, of course, New Japan Pro Wrestlers, pro wrestling stars, from their stints in Impact Wrestling were also shown. So it's very interesting. Very interesting that Scott D'Amore is teasing that maybe the conversations have already started. And that's kind of, to be honest, that's what I said in the past when it came to all this. If you look at what happened last year, and it does look like, essentially, like last year, it's just going to repeat itself. Obviously, last year we had all of a lot of WWE Superstars were released in April, like a week or so after WrestleMania, and that was due to budget cuts due to the global pandemic. What they did, though, by doing that, is WWE inadvertently created a ton of buzz for Impact Wrestling and AEW, but really specifically for Impact. I think AEW didn't lean on it as much as Impact did, and what Impact did is they used these releases last year, and suddenly they exploded. They absolutely exploded. People have been talking about Impact and the good content that they've been doing for several years now. They have been doing a decent show for several years. There's still obviously massive issues when it comes to finding Impact, viewing Impact. It's not the TNA wrestling product, or they don't have the TNA wrestling exposure that they did in the mid to late 2000s on Spike TV, with all of the money from Dixie Carter and Panda Energy and Jeff Jarrett and all that kind of stuff. They've got that history, but they're almost just a completely different company at this point. But they've got that history, which is obviously very important to them. And a lot of people had kind of either just stopped watching Impact, or thought that they'd been bought and shut down, or because they don't have AXS TV, they weren't aware of them, whatever. There was a variety of reasons. And last year, because of these talent releases, suddenly Impact started teasing a lot of stuff, and they capitalized on it, I mean, so well. Whoever was behind the creative for it, or whoever was behind the marketing for it, or whatever, you have to applaud them, because they got so much buzz. They really did. They got so much buzz last year because of this. And what they did is they just spent weeks and weeks and weeks teasing for Slammiversary, teasing these stars coming over. For Eric Young, we had these teasers of Super Eric on Impact Wrestling last year. We had for when it came to EC3, after Moose defeated, I think it was Hernandez or someone on Impact on AXS TV, EC3's music started to play, and all of this kind of stuff, they just did a fantastic job. And because of that, they had a massively, massively successful Slammiversary show last year, where it was trending in the United States, I think #1, but it was also trending worldwide. For that to happen for a company like Impact Wrestling is massive. It's absolutely massive. And it was only until actually Impact Rebellion last weekend that they started to get back to that level, because the Impact Rebellion pay-per-view is actually the best business that Impact Wrestling have done on pay-per-view for several years, ever since Anthem bought the company back in 2017. So we're talking a considerable amount of time. So Impact Wrestling has really been on a really steady growth, to be honest, and it really, for me, did kickstart last year. So I think we're going to see the same thing. I think we're going to see the same thing this year. I think the anticipation's already building, and I think if you're an Impact Wrestling official, or if you're an Impact Wrestling fan, or anyone that is involved in that process, they should be looking at this as, okay, last year, heading into Slammiversary, because of this feeling of who's going to show up, who's going to reemerge in Impact Wrestling, who's going to debut in Impact, which of these recently released WWE stars are going to come over, all that kind of stuff. They should look at that last year and go, okay, that was really, really successful. Of course, we want to replicate that and do that again. But also, importantly, we want to look at last year and say, okay, last year was good. How can we do it better? And I think that's a really important thing to look at if you're Impact. You have to look at last year and go, okay, what could we have done better last year that we weren't able to do last year? What are we able to do this year? And I think I mentioned this previously when I was talking about a couple of videos about Kenny Omega and Impact Wrestling, that arguably, if you look at it and you compare both cards, and of course we don't know the Slammiversary card at the moment, but if you compare the roster that Impact Wrestling has now, even if you had, say these names that are next to me here, say these names, whether it's Samoa Joe, Chelsea Green, or Billy Kay, I've got Peyton Royce on there, but say the Iconics, say that was the 4 names that show up, and I don't know if that will be the case, I don't know. But say those 4 names showed up, add them to a card that's going to have Kenny Omega on it, defending the Impact World Championship. Add that to an X Division, which is by far stronger, I think, now than it was last year. Add to that also, you've got the Good Brothers wrestling on that show. They made their debuts for Impact last year at Slammiversary. Add to that some New Japan Pro Wrestling talent, whether it's Finn Juice or some other names that are possibly going to come in. We'll touch on that in a second as well. Added all of that, you could argue that actually we're probably looking at a scenario where this Slammiversary card is going to be better this year. It's going to be more highly anticipated, it's going to have more hype around it, and you're going to have the mystery and the intrigue of possibly these ex-WWE stars and former Impact Wrestling stars returning to the company. So they should be looking at this to say, we can do what we did last year, but we can do it even better. So I think this anticipation when it comes to Slammiversary is only going to continue. I really do think so. And I think Scott D'Amore, to be honest, I think he's telling the truth when he's saying that perhaps those conversations have already started, because if you look at how the Good Brothers signed with Impact Wrestling last year, it really wasn't long after they were released by WWE that Impact picked up the phone and started to call them. And I'm absolutely sure, when it comes to, say a Samoa Joe, as Scott D'Amore said there, he was the guy that helped sign Samoa Joe in 2005. Now, do I think Samoa Joe is going to come back to Impact? Again, my prediction has always been that he'll end up going to AEW. But look, I have no doubts. I really have no doubts that Scott D'Amore, they're not too proud. They're not one of these companies. They've proven this at this point. They're not one of these companies that are going to be like, well, we'll give him time and let's see him out. We'll wait for them to call us. No, they'll pick up the phone. They'll make a call. And we know how the talent arrangement and the talent contracts work in Impact Wrestling. I say that Samoa Joe's I think he's going to go to AEW, but it doesn't rule out him not making an appearance, because Impact Wrestling will be more than happy to have Samoa Joe for one night. They'll do that. EC3 returned to Impact Wrestling last year. I think he made, was it 2 appearances? 1 appearance inside the Impact Zone. Apart from that, all of his stuff was taped vignettes. He had a match with Moose. That was a cinematic match outside of Impact, and now he's with Ring of Honor. it was a unique deal. They have lots of talent contracts right now, whether it's Matt Cardona or whether it's Alex Shelley when Alex Shelley returns, or a plethora of other guys. I think James Storm's another one where they don't actually have full-blown contracts with Impact Wrestling. In reality, all they actually have is per appearance deals, handshake deals. You're going to show up at the next tapings. That's great. We'll factor you in. They're very, very flexible when it comes to that. So there's absolutely a possibility that Scott D'Amore might have picked up the phone, or someone within Impact, Don Callis, who knows, whoever. They've picked up the phone to Samoa Joe within days of him getting his WWE release, and they've said, you know what? Do you want to come in? Do you want to show up at Slammiversary? Don't have to sign anything. Don't worry about it. It'd just be great to have you there. So I think he's telling the truth when he says that those conversations may have already started. And I've said before that Samoa Joe, I think he's going to AEW. I think the Iconics going to Impact Wrestling is just the perfect fit. I think it really is the perfect fit, considering you've got a female tag team division and female tag team championships there. It makes total sense that the Iconics go there, and they're building tag teams now at this point, right? Not only you've got Fire and Flavor, you've also got Jordan Grace and Rachel Ellering. You're building tag teams in that division, and I think that's really exciting. And getting the Iconics in, obviously, giving them a creative freedom and a loose rein when it comes to their promos, it's a license to print money. It really is. So I see them going. Samoa Joe, like I said, I could see an appearance. I think AEW's the destination for him. I really do. As far as Chelsea Green, I think she's pretty much locked in. I really, really do. And I know people have said, well, she might go to AEW. Maybe it's a better deal for her to go to AEW. Maybe. I just think her history, her connections. Matt Cardona's there. She's got relationships with the likes of Scott D'Amore and Don Callis, and it just everything to me adds up that she would go to Impact Wrestling. So I think he's right. And look, we're going to be doing a lot of videos. We're going to be doing a lot of videos talking about this subject, because as we head into July, as we head into Slammiversary, we're going to get an absolute ton of teases and hints about who's going to show up. That was what was great about Impact last year as well. On top of, obviously, just the anticipation of who was going to show up, they did a really, really good job last year of teasing on Impact on AXS TV, who's going to show up. They did subtle hints, Easter eggs, little things in promos, and I think they'll do the same thing this year. So that's really, really exciting. I'm excited to see who shows up, and you can let me know in the comment section who you think is going to sign with Impact Wrestling, or at the very least just show up, of course. But I do want to talk about something else before we wrap it up here. And I mentioned about New Japan Pro Wrestling and the relationship with Impact Wrestling. And this was a big announcement made this past week on Impact that I do want to touch on before we finish up. That New Japan Pro Wrestling's El Phantasmo will make his Impact Wrestling debut next week. Now, a video package aired during this week's Post-Rebellion Impact, hyping up El Phantasmo's arrival, and he will begin his run with the promotion on May 6th. Now, this will be the first time that El Phantasmo has stepped in the ring in almost 3 months. He was featured at the top of New Japan Pro Wrestling's junior heavyweight division earlier this year, but he hasn't wrestled in Japan since losing a 3-way for the vacant IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship at Castle Attack in February. At the time, he was using a loaded boot gimmick to win his matches, but if that device will follow him to Impact Wrestling remains to be seen. Now, with El Phantasmo's debut, the relationship between Impact and New Japan Pro Wrestling continues to grow. Former IWGP Heavyweight Tag Team Champions FinJuice made their Impact debuts back in February, and they defeated the Good Brothers to win the Impact World Tag Team titles in March. After a brief return to New Japan to compete in the New Japan Cup, they are now back with Impact Wrestling and successfully retained the titles at Rebellion. So this is just the latest step, isn't it? This is the latest step in this Impact Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling relationship, and it's great to see. It really is great to see. I think obviously he's going to be, considering he was a junior heavyweight, I think this means that he's going to be featured in the X division, which is exciting because if you've seen any of the videos that I've done about Impact Wrestling over the course of the last sort of 12 months or so, one of my big things for Impact that I felt that they needed to address in 2021 was improving that X division. It kind of lost its identity a little bit and it lost its focus, and frankly Impact Wrestling, I doubt they watch, but they really did address that this year, whether it was Ace Austin, Josh Alexander, who I love as the X Division champion. I think that's such a great champion to have because I think it reminds everyone that it's not about being a high flyer. It's not a cruiserweight division by any stretch of the imagination. It's about unique styles. It's about a hybrid style, and Josh Alexander fits that perfectly. I think Josh Alexander can be a world champion in Impact Wrestling. I think him winning the X Division championship is just the beginning. Who knows if he used the whole Option C deal, maybe he faces Kenny Omega in Slammiversary or July or Bound for Glory in October. That's an interesting perspective. So I think El Phantasmo slides in there fantastically, and having matches against Ace Austin, Chris Bay, Josh Alexander, that's a big deal. That is a big deal, and that's really, really exciting. And as I mentioned, it continues this working relationship that we're seeing now between Impact and between New Japan, and I think it opens that forbidden door for an Okada, for a Naito to come in. I think Okada's most likely, and I've mentioned this before, he was featured in the Slammiversary promo. He's been rumored to be heading to the United States for the past few months. Whether that was for AEW or Impact Wrestling, that still remains to be seen. I know a lot of people thought it was more likely he goes to AEW, but considering the relationship at this point that Impact has with New Japan, I know AEW are kind of forging their own relationship, and we have had a little bit of crossover. We'll see more on Dynamite this week with Jon Moxley in the IWGP Heavyweight Champion and IWGP United States Heavyweight Championship. But I just think the relationship is stronger. I think the relationship is stronger between Impact and New Japan. There isn't the tension there that maybe is there from the AEW side of things about obviously all the talents leaving New Japan and going over to start AEW. I don't think that's really much of a problem anymore, but I just think it's stronger. I think the relationship is stronger between Impact and New Japan. So it's just another case of this relationship flourishing, which is really exciting because I think it's the next step. And I've said before, I think Okada shows up in Impact. I do. And if Impact Wrestling can pull this off, where they have maybe for Slammiversary or Bound for Glory, I don't know when this would be. If it is for Slammiversary, talk about a main event. This would be unbelievable. If they can pull off a main event inside of an Impact Wrestling ring on an Impact Wrestling pay-per-view, on one of their biggest pay-per-views like Slammiversary, if they can pull off having Kenny Omega face Okada for the Unified Impact World Championship, can you imagine? Can you imagine that? That would be such a coup for Impact Wrestling. It would be massive. It would be absolutely massive. Now, one could argue that a match that big probably deserves to be on like an AEW stage in front of fans with wider exposure. That's true. That is true. But to me, this El Phantasmo thing, it's incredibly exciting, but it's the next step. It's the next step, and it's incredibly exciting. It really is. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on, of course, Scott D'Amore teasing some of the former Impact Wrestling stars returning, the ex-WWE stars coming over to Impact Wrestling, saying those discussions may have already started, and New Japan Pro Wrestling's El Phantasmo being announced to make his Impact Wrestling debut next week on Impact on AXS TV. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to WrestleNews 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right-hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak for you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.